So this is the agenda. There'll be a call to order. So I'm calling this meeting to order since it's just you and me, Jean. And then we'll do a roll call. So I'm going to do a roll call here real quick. Jean Lee.
Here.
All right. And Kathy Anderson here. And then Timothy Travis is not here. And Brenda Martin is not here. And Julia Roberts are not here. Okay. So this is the agenda. Jean, we're going to, like I said, call to order, roll call. We've done that. Approval of the agenda. So what we're going to do today is review the group norms here in a second. And then we'll do our subcommittee work group time, and then we'll adjourn the meeting. All right. So Jean, we have to keep our cameras on because this is a public meeting. Members must speak when called on for roll call. We've already done that. The meeting, as you know, is being recorded. And then just a reminder to stay focused on the topic agenda at hand for the sake of time and the hybrid environment. All right, so I'm going to minimize that. Okay. Trying to bring up our other screen here. It's taking a minute, Jean.
Are you sharing that screen, Kathy, or are you just looking at it on your end?
Oh, I guess I was just looking at it on my end. You couldn't see any of that?
No, but I heard you.
Okay. All right. Sorry about that.
Okay.
All right. And you're still small for some reason. Okay. So, Jean, what we need to do today is we need to look at the priorities. Let me share those with you. Hang on. Let me share my screen. Let me see if this will work, Jean. All right, and I'm going to share. All right, so here are the priorities. Can you see those, Jean?
I've got my toolbar is in the way. I don't know if I can move that. I can see if you can scroll up a little bit on your document. Yeah, I can see priority. Okay, yes, I can see priority 1 and 2, and then when we go through that, you can scroll up a little more and I'll see priority 3.
Okay. And just a reminder that the council's purpose is to make recommendations regarding the provision of services for gifted and talented students in Kentucky's education system. So these were the top 3 recommended priorities. And the purpose of our meeting today is to edit these according to our last council meeting. So I don't know if you've got a copy of the transcript, but I found that to be helpful. So what I did, Jean, is I went back and looked through the transcript for where we started with our priorities to see what council members had said or suggested in the way that we edited. And as I looked through it, there were several comments, mainly starting, I guess, on page 18, that we needed to add something about services. That it said equity practices - identification and services, and yet in the statement there hadn't been any mention of services. So Kimberly Clayton Code, you know, she's the one that said something about adding services. She said we could just add the word services that are equitable right after identification practices. I think at one point that's what she said. And then there was some more discussion of that, and somebody brought up the point about, well, did we need to put everybody in there, all those groups? And there was some discussion about what groups should be in there. And then we kind of tabled it for a little while and went on to priority statement 2 and priority statement 3. And then at the end of our meeting on page 23 of the transcript, Brandy Corbin suggested that we could maybe say something to this effect, and that's what I tried to capture here in the document. She said, possible wording for priority 1, support identification practices and services for all students and remove barriers for equal opportunity and access. So what are your thoughts about that, Jean?
Well, I like the idea of, I like that remove barriers for equal opportunity and access. I do remember that there was some discussion about, do we need to separate students? Um, my thoughts are that we could use the word all for sure and should, but does it make a difference? Does it change anything if we say something like including and list some of the concerns that have been raised in other discussions of particular groups, like twice exceptional English learners, all socioeconomic statuses, all ethnic groups? You don't want to leave a group out, any group.
Right. So maybe we could list, like you said, some of those that we feel are most underrepresented, and maybe we could put after all students, say, such as twice exceptional, and I don't know what other groups you'd want to put there.
Well, I had worked on
What
it.
groups do you think might be the most important for us to maybe to say such as or something like that?
I'd worked on it a little bit between our last meeting and now, and I think what Brandy Corbin has said is very similar, and I kind of put this together based on what I heard at our last regular meeting, and I had said support identification practices that are equitable for all students, including those that present barriers for opportunity and access, such as students who are twice exceptional, English learners, students associated with racial and ethnic groups, all socioeconomic statuses, and students with special considerations, because special considerations had also come up in one of our discussions.
Okay.
So, that was kind of what I was thinking, trying to put it all together. And then I think her wording, Brandy Corbin's wording of what she has said about removing barriers for equal opportunity and access, I think that's good phraseology to have in there. The specific groups that I had were the twice exceptional English learners, students associated with racial and ethnic groups, all socioeconomic statuses, and students with special considerations. And my thinking is just, I know all means all, but you want to assure that there's no doubt and that no one is left out or overlooked, and that barriers for all types, all students are removed. So
Okay.
that's just my thought. I'm one person.
Right.
Like the
Right.
list. But I know we had some discussion there that others felt like all was enough.
Correct. There was. So let me just go back. Let's just go back through the transcript here. So I'm starting on page 17, where there's just some talk about, the group, and then 18, like I said, Kimberly Clayton Code says we need to add services, and then Philip down at the bottom, he says, I'm wondering why this subcommittee chose to phrase all racial and ethnic groups. He says, if anyone could comment on that. I guess my first question about that, it seems to be basically say everyone. And he says, let me speak just for myself, not for the whole group, liking finding the groups for whom. Gifted education has got a lot of bad press, maybe that. It has often been in regards to ethnic and racial groups, as well as in lower socioeconomic groups. I think this is Dr. Roberts speaking here. And so it's kind of been normal to define the groups in this way. The past, just speaking for me, not the whole group. I suppose another thought on that is we have looked at gaps, so we have done that for some time now. That is one of the ways that diversity has been examined in terms of meeting proficient levels of treatment. Consequently, I guess my point is if I read the words, all racial and ethnic groups also show economic students. That basically says every student that walks through the door, so there is no diversity and that there is no, it seems pointless to have it there is what he says, the way it's worded, because you're saying we're going to consider every kid equally. And I think maybe you do that by law, but then why include that there? And he goes on to say because it's not saying you'll consider racial or ethnic minorities or disadvantaged socioeconomic students, it's saying you'll consider them all. And Joe says other thoughts. I don't think that's Joe. I think that's actually Dr. Roberts. She says any other thoughts on that? And then Katie Booth does the clause about present barriers for opportunity and access and ends the quote there. So, and then Joe gives a suggestion about, we might focus on, say, support identification practices that are equitable for all students, including twice exceptional learners, twice exceptional English learners. But he says, to make a focus on the racial and ethnic groups, socioeconomic students, and students with special considerations that presents barriers for opportunity and access that may not be what you want. Anyway, he says, my point is all of the students covered first with your emphasis on a certain group. She wanted to highlight her target. He says, I don't know if that helps. So you're right. There was a discussion about should we include all of the groups there. And that's when Dr. Roberts said, well, I think maybe we should just move on and come back to that. And then we went on to number 2. So
I think in the original discussions of the priority committee that based on different members' experiences in different parts of the state, maybe where barriers have been presented to different types of groups is where that discussion initiated. And I think that in the priorities statements that that we would be able to address those kinds of issues. And then I think what Dr. Roberts was part of what she was saying was that when we look at data, we look at different subgroups. And so, to include those subgroups as a priority for gifted education just strengthens gifted education was my perception of what the discussion was.
Right. So Joe has joined us. Jean. And did you get it muted?
Yep.
Okay. So Joe's joined us, Jean. Joe, it's just me and Jean and you.
All right.
All right. So we're discussing whether to put the language in about the different subgroups that you see up there in the priority statement. And Jean has made the statement that, when we desegregate data in our school report card and for other purposes, that we list these groups. And one of the reasons that we wanted to list these groups is to ensure that people understood that the GT program also wants to equitably have processes in place to serve and identify these students. Did I say that correctly, Jean?
Absolutely, yes. You
Okay.
said that better than I did, and that is absolutely correct in what I was thinking.
So it makes sense to keep it, right?
I think Jean was saying that we could say support, identification, and services for all students, and then say including, and list the students that are there, and then also use that phrase to remove barriers for equal opportunity and access.
Makes sense.
All right. So Jean, do you want me just to take the students here maybe down to special considerations, maybe cut that and put it after students? See if I can do that. And I'll put the word including, if I can type correctly.
And I had changed it to including those that present barriers for opportunity and access, such as. And
Okay.
and it doesn't have to be worded that way at all.
Well, let's see which way it flows best. So I wrote support identification practices and services for all students, including twice exceptional English learners, all racial and ethnic groups, all socioeconomic students, and students with special considerations, and remove barriers for equal opportunity and access. And then, of course, you'd leave that part off there. If we do it your way, then we would say support identification and practices and services for all students that present barriers for opportunity and access. Read yours again.
I like it your way. Honestly, I think I like it better the way that you've done it, the way that you've got it there.
Okay. Let me just read through it one more time here. Support identification practices and services for all students, including twice exceptional English learners, all racial and ethnic groups, all socioeconomic students, and students with special considerations, and remove barriers for equal opportunity and access. I don't know that that flows very well, that last part there.
The last part doesn't flow as well as the first part, yeah.
I think it works better to say support identification and practices and services for all students. Support identification practices and services for all students that present barriers for opportunity and access.
That's the way I had
Or
it.
such groups. I think it works better the way you had it.
Well,
so read the way you've got it again.
The way I had it was support identification practices that are equitable for all students.
Okay, hang on. Let me just put that up there. That are equitable for all students. Let me cut and put that up there. Go on.
Including those that present barriers.
Okay, including. Let me just type that. Including those who present barriers
For opportunity and access.
For opportunity and access. Okay.
Such as students who are twice exceptional, and then the English learners.
Okay.
And I added a word there, students associated with racial and ethnic groups.
Hang on. Twice exceptional, English learners, students associated with racial groups.
Racial and ethnic groups. All socioeconomic statuses.
Associated with.
And students with special considerations. And I'm not sure that's the best wording of it. And when you changed it around, I kind of like that better for a minute, but we can look at both of them and see what flows better. I'll tell you why I like your way better, Kathy. Right. I like the fact that after all students, it actually mentions the subgroups of students.
Right.
So we can kind of look at both of those and
yeah, I think the way that reads is like to me, it's like the students are creating a barrier.
No,
You don't
that's,
want it to read that way.
I would take that out, and if you just took that out, if you took support identification practices that are equitable for all students, including students who are twice exceptional English learners, students associated with racial and ethnic groups, all socioeconomic statuses, and students with special considerations, and then added something about barriers. Like, what did Brandy Corbin had said something about barriers? She had some words.
Yeah, she said, and remove barriers for equal opportunity and access.
You could say at the end of that, in order to remove barriers.
Yeah, or you could just say to remove.
Or
Yeah. To remove. To remove barriers for equal opportunity and access.
And then just get rid of who
And
are.
just get rid of the who
Just
are.
put a period.
Support identification practices that are equitable for students, including those students. Did I say that again? Support identification practices that.
Well, you had before all students. Support identification practices that are equitable for all students.
Gotta put the all back in there. All students, including, I'm gonna take out.
And then just take out students, including those who are twice exceptional English learners, students. You need to S, students associated with racial and ethnic groups, all socioeconomic students, and students with special considerations to remove. Yeah, I think that sounds good.
Yeah. All right. So I'm just going to make that black.
Somebody had said something about services, about not just identification, but services as well.
Oh, yeah.
I thought that was an important point.
Yes, and services.
That is very good. Good catch.
Yeah, thanks. I had that in there, but then
practices and services that are equitable for all students.
Okay. Take off the highlight.
That looks good to me. I think it has everybody's comment covered.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think Philip was saying that we might need to take out all of the different groups, but then there were other people that felt like we need to keep those in, and so I think we'll just keep those in for now.
And I think you keep it because of the very nature of the GT group. Mm-hmm. That's your area of focus.
Right, equity.
And you can't assume that.
Right, true. Yeah. Right. All right, well, we'll move on to priority number 2 then, Jean. Okay. So it did say communicate and provide guidance to school districts and families that assessment accommodations must be provided to students who have an individual education plan or 504 plan. And one of the council members said that we needed to include resources. I think that was on page 22. Philip said, as a former school board member, I would just say you might also add something at the end that is a priority, that some students, that districts actually have the resources to provide the accommodations. So I just added the language and resources after guidance. Communicate and provide guidance and resources to school districts and families that assessment accommodations must be provided to students who have an individual education plan or 504 plan.
I think that gets.
I think that's all right.
Yep.
All right. Good. All right. So we've modified that one. I'll just. Okay. Oh, Joe, I don't have track changes on like we talked about. So maybe I just highlight the changes that we made.
Highlight, yep.
Okay.
And just explain.
Okay, support identification. So we added and services here to this one up here that are equitable for all students. I think we added that too, that are equitable for all students. I think we kept the list of students. And then we also added to remove barriers for equal opportunity and access. That was added. Yep. And then down here, the only thing that was added was and resources.
Yep.
Okay. And then Jean, priority number 3, someone, I believe it was Pauline Carter Covington on page 23, she said, and I would like to recommend for the priority statement 3 that we include teachers in the statement, and Kimberly Clayton Code said I would second that. So I added teachers before parents. I don't know if that's the best place to put it. Highlight the important, I can read it and see how it sounds. Highlight the importance of social emotional learning needs of our gifted students and gather resources that various role groups such as school psychologists, counselors, teachers, and parents can use to address the needs of their students.
Does it need to go before school psychologists if you're thinking like a hierarchy?
And a hierarchy?
Of it? I don't know. Or is it okay where it's at?
Jean, you have any thoughts on where it should go in the list?
No, I mean, it doesn't. I guess if I had a thought, it would be your school psychologist and your counselors are your in terms of social emotional needs.
Yep, that's right.
They have, that expertise that could actually share with teachers and parents.
Yep. It makes sense to have teachers, parents, and students together too.
Yeah. So I think teachers after counselors is fine with me, and it makes sense to me.
Yep.
Okay, we'll just leave that there, and I'll make it black, but keep it highlighted, I guess. Take off these brackets here. All right. So that's good. I think we put all the edits in that we tried to capture those that people commented on. And then I'd just like to remind us that the council's purpose is to make recommendations regarding the provisions of services. And I'm just wondering if we need to go back and maybe update some of the priority statements to ensure that that's what the council's doing, is recommending, and that they're not actually going to do that work themselves, because it's important that we understand our purpose, I think. So
are you saying to add language?
Like right at the beginning, maybe of the statements, just to make sure that, we're not going to have work groups that work on these things necessarily. I think the first statement's okay. We're going to support identification practices and services that are equitable for all students, but then number 2, where it says communicate and provide guidance, that's something that we could recommend that the KDE does, but that's not something necessarily that the advisory council will get into. And there might be people on the council who are external partners to helping provide, to the KDE, but that wouldn't be something that the council itself would do. So we might say on priority number 2, like recommend to the KDE, or recommend to the Kentucky Department of Education, recommend that the Kentucky Department of Education communicate and provide guidance. I'm not going to add that as an example.
That works.
Yep.
So you think maybe I should just add that there?
Recommend the KDE. Yep.
I might need to spell that out since it hadn't been
You
stated
just need
before.
Recommend, right? And take the ED.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I'll highlight that because that's a change.
Yep.
And
looks good to me.
Okay. And then the third one down here, highlight the importance of social emotional learning needs of our gifted students. Highlight. I guess the question is, how are we going to do that?
Yeah, where would you highlight?
How would you do that?
Well, basically what you're asking is that districts across the state highlight the importance of social emotional learning needs that are gifted students, and all those people, those groups that we mentioned. And that stakeholders gather resources from all those groups that we mentioned. So yeah, who are we recommending, or what entity?
So would it be recommend that the KDE reach out to school districts to emphasize? Yeah.
So Joe suggested we could maybe recommend that the KDE reach out or contact school districts to highlight the importance of,
yep.
Say that.
And I kind of remember the last meeting. Is this the one where Dr. Roberts, she brought up the point that she was wanting to contact stakeholder groups to see who would be interested in kind of sharing that message or vision. So I think this one kind of, as Dr. Roberts and the Gifted Talented group gather that information, they can pass that along for KDE to give to school districts to say these groups promote and partner on these areas. I think, is that where Dr. Roberts was going?
Yes, there were several groups listed in the statute, and Dr. Roberts thought it would be a good idea to contact them to let them know that the State Advisory Council was meeting again and that we would like to partner with them to.
So I think by adding what we added, it helps deliver what she wanted to do with that, I think.
Yeah, I think so too.
So I have a question. We've added that language to number 2 and number 3. What would prevent us from adding similar language to number 1?
There's nothing that prevents us. We could say something to the same effect. Recommend that the KDE supports identification practices and services.
It'd be school districts again on 1, right?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what Joe said.
Would it be recommend that the KDE contact districts? Districts would be doing that, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So do we want to say contact or support districts in identifying?
I like support.
Yeah. Support districts. Okay, yeah, that's good.
And because you could do that through training.
Yep, that's good. You're
resources. Right. So that would be the change there.
Yep.
Okay.
Looks good to me.
Yeah, I think that looks good, Jean. Well, I think we have accomplished all that we set out to do. And I think that's.
So next steps will be at the next meeting. We'll present these to the full group and then they'll review them, vote on them. And if they have any discussion, we'll go from there. But I think they'll be appreciative of the new language though. I
think so too. And we'll also send this out, Jean, for everybody to review before the next meeting so that they'll have time to look at it and, kind of simmer on it.
Dr. Roberts was wanting to see the recording.
Right. And then Dr. Roberts wondered if it would be recorded, so it's being recorded, so that's good. And, yep. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Jean. It was good to see you.
You too. You're welcome. You all have
a
Take care.
Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.